welcome everyone to this informational video on the irrigation replacement renovation that's going to be occurring in conjunction with the bunker renovation as part of the master plan of renovations for the Brantford Golf and Country Club. My name is Stephen Hicks. I'm the golf course superintendent here at your Brantford Golf and Country Club. And I'm very delighted here today to have Mr. Tim Fredericks alongside with me. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes, my name is Tim Fredericks. I'm an irrigation consultant with the firm Fredericks & McGuire Limited. We're an irrigation company that does irrigation design and project management for new irrigation for golf, racetracks, basically any form of turf. The scope of our work is to design an irrigation system and then project manage the works as they are being performed. Currently, right now, we're doing similar projects as being proposed at Brantford, at Royal Montreal, Capilano. We have done in the past, we've done Bayview, Laval-sur-Lac.
Just for background on the decision to bring Tim on, Tim and I worked together briefly at Bayview Golf and Country Club, and in seeing how well he worked there with us as managers, with contractors, with boards, and everyone in general that was involved with that project, and knowing the scope of the work and the complications that are going to occur on our property, crossing the road multiple times, I felt it were best for us to get both the best product and best bang for our buck by bringing on Tim as a consultant to move this project forward.
So the rationale behind replacing an irrigation system has traditionally revolved around coverage of the turf itself. In the case of the Brantford Golf and Country Club, realistically speaking, the irrigated turf is limited to greens, tees, and fairways. There is really no appreciable rough, there is no bunkers, and there's specifically no perimeters around the greens. On top of that, it tends to be infrastructure replacement. When your irrigation system was replaced, the mandate would have been for a 20-year replacement. In actuality, most irrigation systems that are designed for 20 years do last longer. It's a very invasive process. It's very expensive. The difference between what you have currently now and what you would have is basically now you have a large residential irrigation system, in the sense that it was put in under the mandate of just irrigating the turf with no real delineation for playable areas. On top of that, the type of fittings that were used, the type of valves that were used, the type of wires that were used were not really ever projected for a lot of longevity. And therefore, the golf course starts to see failures, poor performance, inabilities to perform maintenance on the actual irrigation system itself. In terms of this project, the real mandate would be to improve the irrigation and improve the infrastructure. As an example, probably the biggest improvement will be perimeters around the greens. Currently, when you irrigate your greens, it waters the greens and the perimeters around it, the area from the edge of the green down to the cart path the best it can.
All right, Tim, so speaking of perimeters, how about we go and look at an example here. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so Tim, I think we're looking at the third hole here, which was a cause for concern, I think is the polite way to put it, for the majority of our membership this year. So what we're looking at here is the new layout. And so if you could kind of explain the difference between what we have now, what we're looking at, that'd be great.
Okay. So on this hole, realistically speaking, we're watering about 5 different areas. We're watering the greens, the approach, the rough, the tees, and the perimeters. The greens, we'll start with the greens. The greens currently are at 80-foot spacing, and they are basically a triangle pattern between all sprinklers. In this case, there are 4 ones that are represented by the blue dots. The triangle spacing is used because it's a more uniform irrigation pattern and tends to save water, and it also prevents, in many ways, overwatering or overwatering specific areas in an ununiform pattern. The reason the challenge on number 3 green is the green is very large, so therefore the sprinklers need to be large to cover the surface. In this case, 80 feet, in which case number 4T, you will notice on the left-hand side of number 3 green, the blue circles are sort of a half circle, and that represents a part circle sprinkler, which would not water the 4T. Consequently, that brings us to perimeters and the surfaces outside the greens per self. In this case, those are represented in this by green circles, half circles, and red half circles, and the yellow, which represents irrigating the bunker itself. So to start with the perimeters, we need 4 heads around that green, being the 2 green ones on the left-hand side, which happen to be 45 feet. The reason why they're small is that the TDEC doesn't want to be watered. Stephen doesn't want the TDEC to be watered, obviously, when you water the perimeters. There's many reasons for that: coverage, water savings, chemical applications for the delineations. On the right-hand side, we have 2 red sprinklers. Those are perimeters. They water the right-hand side in that front approach. The difference between what you see in front of you and what you have is that there are no perimeter heads currently on the existing irrigation system. So when you water the green, the perimeters do get water, but when you want to water the perimeters alone in order to keep the grass, the turf healthy, consistent turf, you have to water the green, which then affects the playing surface of the green. That brings us to the bunker. That bunker is a south-facing bunker. It gets a lot of play. And in this case, we're going to use bunker drip, which is a subsurface irrigation system that can be irrigated any time of the day. It uses very little water. It doesn't wash out the bunker. It doesn't water the sand. And it will keep that turf, especially on the face, very, very healthy. In this case, there's only 1 bunker, so therefore there is, drip on it. In the case of this golf course, not every bunker around a green is going to get bunker drip. Only ones that really get a lot of high play or aesthetically require some additional water. Further to the hole, at the beginning, we have a couple of approach heads. Those are 70-foot heads. The reason we use 70-foot heads is that they're a very light amount of water, require relatively small piping rather than using larger sprinklers, which have to throw a lot farther and consequently require more water and bigger pipe. The T-deck is basically a triangle pattern. By definition, I call it big and boring. It just covers the surface. In this case, anything outside the T gets watered as collateral watering. The mandate was not to water the rough around the T-deck individually. The amount of sprinklers around a T-deck really come down to how many pods it has, the shape, its telemetry. This hole's a bit of a challenge at the T because on the left-hand side, you have an area which cannot be watered. Hence the reason you have half turns all down the left side of number 3T. As a bit of a background behind fairway irrigation, traditionally in the Ontario market, this would be starting 30 years ago to anywhere up to about 10 years ago. The traditional model or the expected model was that you'd have double row. I think most people or a lot of people have heard of that idea of double row irrigation. Basically 2 sprinklers, in a rectangle pattern, starting at the green, moving towards the tee, equally spaced down the fairway. It is an effective model. It was used at a lot of clubs. In the last 10 years, it has become less popular. In my designs, it most certainly has become less popular because it required the use of bigger pipe. And because we had to use bigger pipe, in this case would have been 3 inches, it required open trenching. So that would require the contractor to strip all the sod back, go along, use a chain trencher, excavate it to about 24 inches depth, then put the pipe in, put the wire in, and then shovel or push back in all the dirt and compact it, and then lay the sod back down. And the simple reality is that it was very expensive to do. Now, in the past, sometimes that was what they call vibratory plowed in, which is what is going to actually happen for the majority of your fairways, which is a case that you do not strip the sod, you do not dig it. You have a machine that basically lays the pipe in at about 18 inches, has a small hump, which then gets compacted down. The the migration away from double row came with the fact that if you tried to plow 3-inch pipe or larger diameter pipe, in the end, what would happen is you would end up with mounding on the fairways where you would see the seam of the actual pipe plowed, which A, is aesthetically unpleasing and also can affect play in the fact that it can redirect the ball. It requires a lot of labor after the fact of the staff to try to level it. The other problem is that the stress of plowing in a larger diameter pipe, such as a 3-inch for a double row system, tended to result in the failure of the pipe joints sooner because of the stress put on them by the actual installation method. So consequently, in order to reduce piping size to make it more feasible and cost effective to install it, we've gone to a triple row. In this case, on number 2 here, those sprinklers are all 70-foot spacing, and they're on a triangle pattern. And for example, they're using about 23 gallons a minute. As opposed to if we went with a double row system, which would involve, if you see any full circle blue dots, and they're about 43 gallons a minute. So it's a lot more water and it's a lot less efficient. Consequently, the new design for the Brantford Golf and Country Club sees the fairways getting larger. So if there was the desire to go with double row, and double row was looked at, it would come down that there would not be enough width between the double row at 80 feet to cover the area between the sprinklers and the edge of the fairway, and you would end up with dry scallop patches, not in the rough, but actually in the fairway itself. The benefit of the triple row design is that without watering the fairway rough, you still have a lot of collateral irrigation. So the fairways by and large will be consistent, green, the ability to water, and then the rough will just fade out into a more naturalized state as it gets into the tree lines and off the edge of the fairways. The simple reality is that the triple row is, by the time you end up plowing in a triple row, in this case it's 2.5-inch pipe versus an open excavation at 3-inch, it becomes virtually the same price. There's very little difference between the two. It will also help expedite the actual process, which is very important during the whole construction project, because vibratory plow can be put in a lot quicker.
So from my understanding, it's basically all the components of the existing irrigation system, including the pumping station, piping, wire, and whatnot.
So yes, Stephen, everything is being replaced except for the short game area. We are going to currently keep the short game area as it is. It is not part of the mandate to replace it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not new, but it is not a high priority area. Otherwise, we're replacing everything on the irrigation system, starting at the pumping station. The pumping station is very much a priority. Currently, it's had a turbine fail. It is well beyond its design life, and it is most certainly a risk. So that's going to be happening this fall. I apologize, this winter time. The station is on order. It is sized according to the new irrigation system. So in terms of the new irrigation system, everything from sprinklers to pipe and wire are being replaced. The wire is probably one of the more specific things that needs updating, in the sense that your irrigation system has already seen a control system, being the controls that run those satellites you see. That's already been updated over 10 years ago. There was problems with wire prior to that. We've now gone wireless. The new current system being designed and what's being replaced is now what they call a 2-wire system, which basically means you have a single wire that serpentines through the golf course. It allows for ease of construction. It allows for additions. It allows for future expansion. It also allows choices to be made during installation to even remove sprinklers, because the burden of removing them isn't very high to the contractor. Otherwise, the biggest thing being replaced is probably the pipes and the valves. The golf course currently does not have a lot of great valving. Valving is section valves that you put in on the property in order to perform maintenance. So if you have a leak, you have a leaky sprinkler, you need to do some excavation and want to shut the water off, you can isolate that individual area while you're continuing to water the remainder of the property. On top of that, there is going to be some irrigation replaced around the clubhouse entrance for aesthetic reasons, to try to keep the turf on the driveway in. That would be collateral irrigation that the club has deemed worthwhile to replace, to sort of complete the image of the club when you approach it.
Now, in terms of construction, as this is part, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, as this is part of a larger project, what exactly are the timelines for installation?
Timelines of installation are to start in the late summer, being August of 2021, and that would see mainline going in primarily through the lower half down by the maintenance shop, holes number 11. We do number 17. That would also correspond with some construction, which would start in September. The Whitman Group is going to start construction down around 17 Green, the area around it, with the focus being on the pond and 17 Green, and we will follow behind them and complete the irrigation as they complete their construction. So in the fall of 2021, having started in August, we anticipate having the majority of the holes basically south of Hardy Road and west of Keir Lane. They will be mostly completed by the winter this year. Starting the next spring, we're going to move across Hardy Road, finish up there, then move up 18. Subsequently, when we get later in the summer, we're going to move up to holes number 1 and 2, and they should be pretty much completed by the end of 2022, but it is also dependent on the irrigation construction.
Now, in terms of expectations going forward, you mentioned earlier that our previous or existing current system is a 20-year specification. What can we expect out of this new system?
This system was designed with the primary infrastructure being 20 to 30 years. In our climate right now, sprinklers and things like that are not an item that tend to last more than 20 years, no matter how much money you throw at them. However, the larger pipe that you're putting in, the wiring, the valves, they're all going to run between a 20 and 30-year life expectancy. A decision was made prior to the design in order to keep it a reasonable cost, possible future construction down the road regarding Hardy Road, to not push the longevity of that system up to maybe 40, 50 years. Would have seen quite a bump in cost. And there was a little bit of uncertainty there on what would happen on some of the holes should Hardy Road ever be expanded.
Thank you, Tim. Now, I know that a big question is going to be the cost of this project, and unfortunately, we don't have that information quite yet. I know we're excited to see some interest from multiple contractors, and hopefully we will have that information sooner than later, but at this time, we don't have a good estimate on cost. Alrighty, Tim. So thank you again for your time. I think we've covered a lot of topics here. Hopefully, lots of our members read this, read the information that's available on the website and watch this video to inform themselves, and so we can make an informed decision on this entire renovation. So if there's any questions or comments or concerns, they can forward them to masterplan@brantfordgolf-cc.com. Again, that's masterplan@brantfordgolf-cc.com. We will be accumulating all of the questions into documents to share ahead of the town hall meetings and ahead of the vote to continue to inform the membership. So thanks again, Tim, and I think they'll be hearing from us soon.
Very good. Thank you very much.